direct creation of the world by God or the gods. According to this view, the world came into existence as the direct product of a divine will. The formation of the universe and the earth is not the result of natural processes, but of a conscious and intentional act of creation. God or the gods brought matter into existence from nothing and shaped the world with a specific order and purpose. In this account, creation is not unplanned. Every element is part of a carefully conceived whole. This idea appears in different forms across many ancient cultures. In some myths, a god shapes the world with their hands. In others, the world comes into being through a word or pure will. The common point is that the world does not form on its own. It begins through direct divine intervention. This approach is based on the idea that the universe is meaningful and purposeful. The world is not random, but the result of a conscious choice. For this reason, humans are often seen as central to creation. The direct creation of the world by gods offers one of the oldest and clearest answers to the question, does God exist? 2. A polytheistic cosmic order. In this view, the universe and the world exist not through a single god, but through the shared order of many gods. Each god represents a specific domain: sky, earth, sea, time, life, or death. The world is the result of a division of roles and balance among these gods. Creation depends not on a single will, but on the interaction of multiple powers. In ancient Greek, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and many other early cultures, the universe was understood this way. Some gods create, some protect, and others disrupt order. The world is shaped not only by harmony among these forces, but also by their conflicts. As a result, the universe is not perfect, but changeable. In this understanding, gods possess human-like emotions: anger, jealousy, compassion. Natural events and fate are seen as reflections of divine relationships. The question, does God exist, here does not point to a single being, but to a multiple and distributed form of the sacred. The world is an order established not by one mind, but by many divine powers acting together. 3. Gods in human form. In this view, gods are imagined in human form. They eat, drink, speak, think, and experience emotions like humans. The difference between gods and humans lies not in essence, but in power and immortality. Gods are stronger, live longer, or never die, yet their behavior remains familiar. In ancient Greek and Roman traditions, gods rejoice, envy, fall in love, and become angry. In Mesopotamian and Anatolian myths, gods live in palaces, hold councils, and make decisions about humans. In this understanding, the god is not an abstract and distant being, but a power close to the human world. Humans try to understand the divine by imagining it in their own image. This approach grounds the existence of God in human experience. The concept of God relies not on something completely unknown, but on what is already familiar. As a result, God becomes both powerful enough to inspire fear and understandable enough to relate to. Here, the question, does God exist, turns into another question. Is humanity projecting its own consciousness and emotions onto the universe? Is God an enlarged reflection of the human self, or a truly divine power that exists in human form? This view questions whether thinking of God in human form is inevitable. 4. Gods as representations of nature. In this view, gods are not separate from nature. They represent nature itself. The sun is a god, the wind is a god, and the sea, earth, storm, and fertility are all understood as divine powers. God is not behind nature, but within it. In ancient beliefs, people identified the natural forces they could not control with gods in order to understand them. When rain fell, a god showed favor. When an earthquake struck, a god was angry. In this understanding, God becomes not an abstract creator, but the name given to the forces operating in nature. Seeing gods as representations of nature is based on finding the divine on earth rather than in the heavens. Humans perceive order, cycles, and destruction in their surroundings as expressions of divine will. Nature is sacred because it is God itself. The question, does God exist, takes on a different meaning here. Does God exist as a separate being, or is nature itself God? If nature is God, then there is no need to look to the sky to see the divine. God already exists in the wind, the water, the soil, and the continuity of life. 5. The cosmic God figure. In this understanding, God is not limited to a specific place, form, or single event. God is a cosmic being that encompasses the entire universe. The heavens, stars, galaxies, and even time itself exist within this God. God is not outside the universe, but is conceived together with it. In the cosmic God figure, God is less a character who intervenes directly in human life, and more the force that establishes the fundamental order of existence. The functioning laws and balance of the universe are seen as expressions of God. For this reason, God is silent but effective, invisible yet everywhere. This view does not humanize God. God does not become angry, joyful, or take sides. God is like a principle that holds all of existence together. As long as cosmic order remains intact, the existence of God is not questioned because God is the order itself. Here, the question, does God exist, becomes, is there a consciousness behind the universe? If the universe is seen not as random but as a meaningful whole, the source of this unity is thought of as a cosmic God. God is not lost within the universe. The universe itself is accepted as God's existence. 6. The creative mother goddess. In this theory, God is not imagined as a father or an authority figure, but as a directly creative mother. The mother goddess is the power that gives birth, nourishes, and sustains. Earth, fertility, birth, and the cycle of life are associated with her. The world is seen as the body of the goddess. Mountains, rivers, and living beings are parts of her existence. In the understanding of the creative mother goddess, God is not distant or abstract. She is present within life itself, within nature. A seed sprouting, a being being born, and life continuing are all part of the goddess's ongoing act of creation. Creation is therefore not a single moment in the past, but a continuous process. In this belief, God does not rule but protects. Rather than enforcing order, she maintains balance. Even death is not seen as an end, but as part of rebirth. Life emerges from the goddess and eventually returns to her. Beginning and end cannot be separated. The question, is there a God? Here turns into, is life itself sacred? If nature is conscious, productive, and continuous, then this structure is understood as the feminine, creative face of God. God is not in the sky, but within the soil, bodies, and the cycle of life itself. 7. Belief in the sky God. In this belief, God is identified with the sky. The sky is seen as unreachable, elevated, and all-encompassing. For this reason, God is imagined as a supreme being, positioned above humanity. The sun, stars, clouds, and the sky dome are not God's dwelling, but signs of divine power. The sky god is usually a figure who establishes order and rules. Major natural events, especially storms, thunder, and lightning, are considered expressions of divine will. Humans do not see this God, but they feel the effects. Looking down from above implies seeing and knowing everything. In this understanding, there is a clear distance between God and humans. God is sacred, humans are limited. This distance gives rise to concepts such as obedience, prayer, and reverence. Turning toward the sky, looking upward, and interpreting signs from above become important ways of approaching God. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a will that establishes order from above? If hierarchy, law, and a top-down sense of order are felt in the universe, the source of this order is imagined as a celestial God. God exists not only in the sky, but in the greatness that the sky represents. 8. The unity of earth and sky deities. In this view, God is not confined to a single direction or realm. Earth and sky do not gain meaning separately, but together. The sky god represents above order and principle, while the earth goddess represents below matter and life. The universe exists through the union of these two forces. In this understanding of unity, creation is the meeting of the principle coming from the sky with the fertile power of the earth. Symbols such as rain falling onto soil or light joining darkness express this idea. God exists neither only in the sky nor only on earth, but in the relationship between the two. When earth and sky remain separate, the world is incomplete. Sky alone is abstract. Earth alone is formless. When unity is achieved, order and life emerge. For this reason, God is seen as the power that harmonizes opposites. Male and female, above and below, unseen and seen gain meaning within this unity. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a principle that holds opposites together? If balance, harmony, and completeness are observed in the universe, the force that provides this balance is understood as the unity of earth and sky. God exists not in separation, but in union. 9. Divine intervention in human fate. In this understanding, God or the gods do not withdraw after creating the universe. They directly touch human life. Events such as birth, death, success, and disaster are seen as results of divine will. Human fate is shaped not only by personal choices, but also by divine intervention. According to this belief, the gods observe humans, test them, and sometimes guide them. At times they reward, at times they punish. The outcome of a war, the rise of a kingdom, or the destiny of an individual can change through a divine decision. Humans are not the sole rulers of their own lives. Divine intervention is not always clear or direct. Signs, dreams, prophecies, and unexpected events are accepted as ways through which the presence of the gods is felt. For this reason, people try to please the gods and live in harmony with them. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a will that affects our lives from outside? If human destiny is thought to change beyond personal control, the source of this change is interpreted as divine intervention. God is not distant, but deeply embedded within human fate. 10. Wars among the gods. In this theory, God or the gods are not in perfect harmony. The universe is shaped by conflicts among the gods. Struggles for power, dominance, and authority begin on a divine level, and their effects are reflected in the human world. Wars, disasters, and major transformations are seen as traces of these cosmic conflicts on Earth. Wars among the gods are used to explain why the universe is not perfect. The struggle between order and chaos, light and darkness, old and new gods constantly reshapes the world. The defeat of a god marks the end of an era. The victorious god establishes a new order. In this understanding, gods are not absolute or unchanging. They can gain power, lose it, or even be destroyed. Humanity is seen as a being caught in the middle of these great conflicts. Human destiny is indirectly affected by the struggles of the gods. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, are there conflicting forces behind the universe? If the world appears unstable, fragile, and full of contradictions, this structure is interpreted as the result of an ongoing struggle among gods. God is not a single absolute being, but part of a cosmic conflict. 11. The immortality of the gods. In this understanding, Gods are not beings who are born and die like humans. Time does not act upon them, or it acts in a very different way. Even if gods change, they do not cease to exist. They transform, withdraw, or continue to exist even when forgotten. Immortality is accepted as a fundamental quality of being divine. The immortality of the gods explains the continuity of the universe. Humans are temporary, but order remains. Seasons return, celestial bodies continue their motion, and nature renews itself. This continuity is linked to the gods being independent of time. Gods are imagined as beings who witness the beginning and will also witness the end. In this view, immortality does not mean invulnerability. Gods can suffer, be defeated, or lose power, yet they do not completely disappear. This emphasizes that divine existence is qualitatively different from human existence. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is a being that resists time possible? If there is a principle in the universe that is not temporary and carries continuity, this principle is explained through the immortality of the gods. God does not die because God is not within time. Time flows within God. 12. The timelessness of the gods. In this view, gods are not merely long-living beings. They exist outside of time itself. Past, present, and future are not separate moments for the gods, but a single whole. Gods do not wait, hurry, or experience change step by step. For them, everything happens at once. The timelessness of the gods explains the limits of divine knowledge. Knowing the future, or never forgetting the beginning, becomes possible by standing outside of time. Events that are uncertain for humans appear as already completed from the divine perspective. For this reason, gods can deliver prophecies or know outcomes in advance. In this understanding, the difference between God and humans deepens. Humans live within time. God encompasses time. Change is unavoidable for humans. For God, change is not a problem, because God stands outside of it. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is a consciousness above time possible? If time is a property of the universe, then a being that transcends it can also be imagined. God is accepted not as something that flows with time, but as a reality that creates time or exists beyond it. 13. The existence of the gods before humanity. In this understanding, gods are beings that existed long before humanity appeared. Even before humans were created, the universe was in order, and this order was established by the gods. Humans are seen as beings added later into a divine world that already existed. The idea that gods existed before humans shows that the sacred order does not depend on humanity. Mountains had risen, the skies had taken their place, and natural laws were already functioning. Humans are born into this ready-made order. For this reason, gods are not imaginary figures created for human needs, but the owners of a cosmic reality in which humans find themselves. In this view, gods have a teaching and guiding role. They remind humans of order, law, and limits. Humans are guests in a world established by the gods. This state of being a guest brings both responsibility and limitation. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a sacred order independent of humanity? If the universe is meaningful and orderly, even without human consciousness, the source of this order is thought to be divine beings that existed before humanity. God does not begin with humans. Humans begin within a world established by God. 14. The gods as establishers of order. In this theory, gods are seen as beings who do not leave the universe to randomness, but give it structure and balance. Chaos, uncertainty, and disorder are transformed into order through divine intervention. The movement of the heavens, the sequence of seasons, and harmony in nature are signs of the order established by the gods. The gods establishing order is not limited to the physical universe. Social rules, moral understanding, and sacred laws are also considered part of this order. Humans learn how to live what is right and what is wrong by looking to the divine order. Order applies both to nature and to human life. In this understanding, gods do not create the universe once and then withdraw. The continuation of order is also under their supervision. When balance is disrupted, disasters, warnings, or processes of restoration emerge. Chaos is temporary. Order is considered essential. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a principle that holds the universe together? If the world operates according to certain laws and chaos does not spread without limit, this functioning is explained through the gods as creators of order. God is thought of not as the source of chance, but as the source of order. 15. The gods creating cosmos from chaos. In this understanding, the universe begins as an undefined and disordered state of chaos. There are no boundaries and no meaningful structure. The gods separate, organize, and shape this confused state. Cosmos, the ordered universe, emerges through the conscious intervention of the gods. Chaos here is not nothingness, but a raw state of existence. Everything is intertwined. The gods separate sky from earth, draw light out of darkness, and give beings their limits. Drawing boundaries is the fundamental act of creation in this theory. Order begins with separation and definition. In this view, gods are not only powerful, but also intelligent. They do not act randomly. They transform chaos into a meaningful whole. The fact that the universe is understandable, measurable, and shows repeating patterns is the result of this intelligence. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, can order arise from disorder? If the universe presents an understandable structure rather than uncontrolled chaos, this structure is seen as the product of divine organization. God is accepted not as the one who destroys chaos, but as the power that turns it into cosmos. 16. God as nature. In this view, God is not a separate being standing outside of nature. God is understood as nature itself. Mountains, seas, winds, and living beings are different expressions of God. The order operating within nature is accepted as a clear sign of God's presence. Understanding God as nature does not distance the sacred. On the contrary, it spreads it everywhere. God is not sought in a specific place or in the heavens. Wherever life continues, God is present. The blooming of a flower, the flow of a river, and the order of celestial bodies are all expressions of God's ongoing existence. In this understanding, God is not a figure who gives commands or shows will, but the fundamental law of existence itself. Just as nature operates, God simply is. Prayer or worship gains meaning, not as a way to change God, but as a way to align with nature. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is nature sufficient on its own, or is it sacred? If nature is orderly, continuous, and all-encompassing in itself, this totality is called God. God is accepted not as something beyond nature, but as nature itself. 17. God, as dispersed throughout the universe. In this understanding, God is not a being located at a single center or governing the universe from a specific point. The divine is spread throughout the entire universe. Every being, every event, and every process contains a share of God. God is conceived as a presence dispersed within the whole. In this view, the universe is not something separate from God. The birth of stars, the movement of matter, and the emergence of life are different expressions of divine energy. God does not speak with a single voice. Every being is a silent expression of God. The idea of God being dispersed throughout the universe brings the sacred into everyday life. There is no need for special places or moments to reach God. Everything that exists is meaningful because it carries God's presence. The human task is to recognize this dispersion and live in harmony with it. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a common essence present in every part of the universe? If an invisible connection and continuity are felt between all things, this connection is interpreted as a divine unity. God is accepted not as being in one corner of the universe, but as existing throughout the entire universe. 18. God as cosmic consciousness. In this view, God is not merely power or law. God is the consciousness behind the universe. All beings emerge within this consciousness and remain connected to it. The universe is not a blind mechanism, but a conscious whole. The idea of God as cosmic consciousness is used to explain order and harmony in the universe. Physical laws, the emergence of life, and the development of consciousness are seen as ways in which this greater consciousness reveals itself. Human consciousness is a small and limited reflection of this cosmic consciousness. In this understanding, God is not an external observer. God brings the universe into existence as if by thinking it. Every event is a process occurring within this consciousness. For this reason, God knows everything, because everything takes place within God's awareness. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, can the universe itself be conscious? If consciousness is not unique to humans and can be imagined as a quality spread across the entire universe, then this consciousness is called God. God is not a ruler of the universe, but a thinking consciousness that is the universe itself. 19. The gods granting knowledge to humans. In this understanding, God or the gods are not only beings who created humanity, they are also forces that transmit knowledge and awaken human awareness. Writing, law, morality, agriculture, astronomy, and sacred knowledge are accepted as coming from a divine source. Humans do not produce knowledge entirely on their own. It is taught to them. The gods granting knowledge reduces the distance between humans and the divine. God ceases to be an unreachable power and becomes a guiding teacher. Dreams, revelations, inspirations, and sacred texts are seen as the means through which this knowledge is transmitted. Knowledge comes from beyond the limits of human reason. In this view, knowledge is not neutral. True knowledge brings humans closer to order and balance, while false knowledge leads to chaos. The gods intervene through knowledge to prevent humanity from losing its way. Knowing becomes a divine gift. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is the source of human knowledge only human? If some knowledge is thought to possess a depth that transcends human experience, its origin is interpreted as divine teaching. God is accepted not only as a creator, but also as a teacher. 20. God as a mythological source. In this view, God is not a directly observed being, but a source that gains existence through myths. Humans create stories to make sense of the universe, life, and death, and place God at the center of these stories. God takes shape within myths and exists through them. Understanding God as a mythological source does not mean that God is fabricated. Rather, God is a symbolic response to the deep questions of the human mind. In the face of chaos, the unknown, and fear, humans create meaning through the figure of God. Myths make God visible. In this understanding, God does not have a single form. God changes from culture to culture and transforms over time. The same question gives rise to different gods in different societies. God becomes the center of humanity's search for meaning. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, why did humans feel the need to tell stories about God? If the idea of God appears in every culture, this shared need points to God's existence as a mythological source. God does not descend from the sky. God is born in the human mind and lives through myths. 21. The gods as observers. In this understanding, God or the gods are not beings who constantly intervene after creating the world. Instead, they take the position of observers, watching, seeing, and recording. The universe functions. humans make choices, and the gods silently observe this process. The observer role of the gods emphasizes human freedom. Humans are directly responsible for their actions. The gods do not guide or force, they merely bear witness. This witness implies that everything is seen and nothing is forgotten. In this view, the divine gaze is understood as absolute awareness. No action is completely hidden. Even without intervention, the presence of the gods gives meaning and weight to human behavior. Being observed creates a moral boundary. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is there a consciousness that witnesses our actions? If there is a sense that human actions are not limited only to oneself, this feeling is explained through the observer role of the gods. God is accepted not as a ruler, but as a knowing and witnessing presence. 22. God viewing the universe as alive. According to this view, God perceives the universe not as a collection of lifeless objects, but as a living whole. Stars, planets, nature, and humans are all parts of a single living order. The universe is not something standing before God, but a living reality that God is aware of and recognizes as alive. Here, life extends far beyond a biological definition. Anything that changes, responds, and forms order is considered alive. The movement, growth, and transformation of the universe are seen as signs of life in God's perception. Therefore, events in the universe are not random, but part of the natural flow of a living process. God, viewing the universe as alive, places humans as small yet meaningful parts of this whole. Humans are not separate from the universe, they breathe along with it. In this view, God is not a distant creator, but a consciousness that understands and watches over a living order. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, is the universe merely a mechanism or a living whole? If the universe is alive as a whole, the idea of a divine consciousness that perceives and comprehends this life emerges. God is thought of not as outside the universe, but as a being who knows and feels its life. 23. God as the cosmic lawgiver. In this view, God is thought of not as a figure who intervenes directly, but as the source of the fundamental laws that govern the universe. The universe is not chaotic. It has a functioning order, a repeating rhythm, and unchanging limits. Behind this order, a divine intellect that establishes cosmic laws is assumed. Cosmic laws include motion, time, matter, and causality. The birth of stars, planets remaining in orbit, and nature maintaining balance all occur through these laws. God, in this perspective, does not manage events one by one, but establishes the system from the beginning. The universe then progresses according to these laws. In this understanding, God's power is seen not in miracles, but in consistency. The same rules applying everywhere in the universe suggest conscious order rather than chance. The unchanging nature of laws is interpreted as the continuity of God's will. Humans also exist within these cosmic laws. Freedom gains meaning not in spite of these laws, but within them. God does not determine human actions moment by moment, but has already set the boundaries and structure of existence. The question, is there a God? Here becomes, did this universal order arise on its own, or does it rest on a lawgiver? If the universe is orderly and this order applies everywhere, the idea of a divine lawgiver as its source emerges. God is conceived as a silent yet constant authority governing the universe. 24. God appearing in sacred places. In this view, God is not felt equally everywhere, but is thought to manifest more intensely in certain places. Mountains, temples, sacred stones, caves, or specific cities are accepted as areas more open to God's presence. Space is lifted out of ordinariness and gains sacred meaning. Sacred places are seen as locations where the distance between God and humans is reduced. In these spaces, God speaks, gives signs, or makes presence felt. Stories of God descending from the sky, appearing on mountaintops, or choosing a specific structure arise from this idea. Space gains meaning through divine selection. In this understanding, God may exist everywhere, but is not visible everywhere. A sacred place is where God chooses to reveal presence. Humans approach these areas with greater silence, care, and respect, because they are perceived as boundaries where contact with the divine is possible. Over time, these places are strengthened by rituals, prayers, and symbols. Even if God is not bound to space, the human mind senses God more easily in these locations. Space becomes a focal point that calls forth the divine. The question, is there a God? Here is considered alongside, why do some places feel more sacred than others? If throughout history certain places have been associated with God, this leads to the idea that God consciously selects locations. In this view, God is spread throughout the universe, but more distinct and closer in certain places. 25. God arising from human imagination. According to this view, God is not an independent reality existing in the external world, but a concept produced by the human mind. Humans seek explanations when faced with events they cannot understand. Experiences such as nature, death, fear, and uncertainty gradually give rise to the idea of a higher being. God emerges as a result of this need. Human imagination here is not seen as mere fabrication, but as an ordering mechanism. The mind creates the idea of God to make a complex and uncontrollable universe more understandable. Events like lightning, earthquakes, illness, or death become more bearable when attributed to a will. In this approach, God reflects humanity's desire to transcend its own limits. Feelings of helplessness, expectations of justice, and fear of death nourish the idea of God. Humans gather unreachable perfection within God. Wisdom, power, and immortality converge in this figure. The form of God changes from culture to culture. This suggests that the concept of God depends on the human mind. The gods of desert societies differ from those of fertile lands. God takes shape according to the world humans inhabit. At this point, the question, is there a God, becomes, why does humanity need the idea of God? If God arises from human imagination, this does not mean God is meaningless. On the contrary, in this view, God is accepted as one of the most powerful and profound creations of the human mind. 26. The absolute creator of monotheism. According to this view, God is one, without equal or counterpart. There is a single absolute will that creates orders and sustains the universe. God does not belong to the universe. The universe depends on God. Time, space, and matter do not exist alongside God, but come into being through God's creation. In monotheistic thought, God is absolute power, bound by no limits and influenced by nothing. The functioning of the universe, the laws of nature, and the continuation of existence all rest on God's will. The order observed in the universe is therefore seen not as coincidence, but as the result of conscious creation. Here, God is not merely a being who initiated the beginning. Creation is not a single, completed event. God is understood as the power that sustains existence at every moment and ensures continuity. The universe cannot exist on its own. It depends on God to remain in being. In this approach, God is transcendent. God cannot be fully grasped by the human mind. What God is not can be stated more clearly than what God is. God resembles nothing that is created. This places God beyond human imagination. The idea of a single absolute creator explains the sense of unity in the universe. Everything comes from the same source and is subject to the same law. Behind all differences stands a single will. This allows the universe to be seen not as fragmented, but as a unified whole. The question, does God exist, becomes, in this view, Can this order exist by itself? The answer is that an absolute creator is necessary. God is not merely a belief here, but the fundamental condition of existence itself. 27. Creation from nothing. According to this view, God created the universe without relying on any pre-existing matter. Creation is not a rearrangement or transformation, but an absolute beginning. Existence emerges from nothingness. Time, space, matter, and laws come into being simultaneously. Here, nothingness does not mean emptiness or hidden potential. It refers to a state where absolutely nothing exists. God calls existence forth from this total absence. This places God entirely beyond the limits of the universe. Everything that exists depends on God, while God depends on nothing. In this understanding, the universe cannot explain itself. At its beginning, there was no cause within the universe that could make it possible. Causality operates inside the universe, but the universe itself is not part of that chain. To begin the chain, a will outside the universe is required. God is not merely the first cause, but the source of causation itself. Creation from nothing also implies that everything created is temporary. Existence is not self-sustaining. Its continuation depends on God's will. If the universe continues to exist, it does so because God sustains it. This view does not place God at the beginning of time, because time itself is created. God is not before time, but outside of it. For God, waiting, changing, or passing through processes does not apply. Creation is not a moment for God, but the outcome of will. The question, does God exist, becomes, can something arise from nothing? According to this view, the answer is clear. Existence from nothing is possible only through an absolute creator. God is not part of the universe, but the only explanation for its existence. 28. God's continuous intervention in the universe. According to this view, God is not merely a force that initiated the universe. Creation did not happen once and then end. The universe stands at every moment through God's will. The laws of nature are not independent mechanical rules, but orders continuously affirmed by God. In this understanding, the universe is not autonomous. Existence is renewed at every moment. If it were separated from God's will, even for an instant, existence would cease. Creation is therefore not a past event, but an uninterrupted process. The world does not simply exist. It is constantly being brought into existence. God's intervention does not have to appear as extraordinary events. The rising of the sun, the beating of a heart, and the production of effects by causes are all considered part of divine intervention. A miracle, in this view, is not the breaking of order, but the owner of order revealing himself. This view is considered alongside human freedom. If God intervenes in everything, how can humans be free? The answer given here is this: God creates possibilities. The choice belongs to the human. God establishes the field of action, but does not force the decision. Intervention is not control, but the enabling of existence. This understanding removes God from being a distant first cause. God is not an observer watching from outside the universe, but a presence involved at every moment. The universe does not function like an independent clock. It is more like continuously played music. If the music stops, the sound ends. The question, does God exist, becomes, can the universe sustain itself? According to this view, the answer is no. The continuation of the universe depends on God's constant presence. Without God, not only the beginning, but the present moment itself cannot be explained. 29. God's complete knowledge. In this view, God is unaware of nothing that occurs in the universe. Past, present, and future are not separate times for God. All are known at once. God does not acquire knowledge over time. Knowledge is a natural aspect of God's being. Here, knowing is not like human knowing. Humans observe, learn, and predict. God directly comprehends what is and what will be. Events are not known because they happen, nor do they happen because they are known. Knowledge is not a cause, but an all-encompassing awareness. In this understanding, God's knowledge is limitless. From the greatest cosmic event to the smallest thought, everything exists within this knowledge. Nothing is hidden, concealed, or accidental. The universe is not a closed system to God, but completely open. At this point, the most difficult question arises. If God knows everything, is the human truly free? The answer given is this: knowing is not forcing. Knowing a choice in advance does not compel that choice. God knows what a person will choose, but God does not make the choice. God's knowledge exists outside of time. Humans consider the future unknown because it has not yet been lived. For God, the future is not an unresolved mystery, but an already known reality. This difference comes from God's perspective, not from a lack of human freedom. This understanding defines God as a perfect consciousness. There are no errors, surprises, or gaps in knowledge. The universe is not complex to God, but whole. Parts are not seen separately, but within a single meaning. The question, does God exist, becomes, is the universe entirely unknowable, or does a field of absolute knowledge exist? According to this view, there is a consciousness behind the universe that knows everything. What is unknown exists only for humans. For God, there is no mystery. 30. God's presence everywhere. According to this view, God does not exist in a specific location. God is not a being who stands somewhere and observes the universe from a distance. God is everywhere, because existence itself is not separate from Him. Space does not contain God. God contains space. Here, being everywhere does not mean physical diffusion. God is not spread like a gas or divided like matter. God's presence everywhere means being in relationship with everything at the same time. No point exists independently of God. In this understanding, being close to or far from God is not a spatial matter. A person can feel distant from God in a temple, or close when alone. Distance is not bodily, but a matter of awareness. God's presence is constant, everywhere. What changes is human perception. God's presence everywhere leads to the idea that the universe is not an empty space. Even emptiness is not devoid of God's presence. Invisible, silent, or motionless places are not outside of God. Existence stands upon a ground permeated by God. This view describes God as a presence that is always available. God does not need to be summoned. He is not far away to approach. God is already there before a person speaks, before a thought forms. God's presence does not wait or delay. An important distinction appears here. God is everywhere, but not everything is God. The universe is not identified as God Himself, yet God is not completely separate from the universe either. This approach sees God as both transcendent and immanent beyond everything, yet within everything. This view does not confine God to a hidden point. God is not in the sky, on a mountain peak, or in a central location. God has no place, because the concept of place gains meaning only within God's presence. The question, does God exist, takes this form. If everything that exists is simultaneously encompassed, what explains this encompassing? According to this view, that encompassing reality is God. Unseen, untouchable, yet no place is without Him. 31. God's independence from time. According to this view, God does not exist within time. He does not come from the past or move toward the future. Time is not a flowing river for God. Time exists only for beings that are outside of God. God's independence from time means that He cannot be defined by before and after. God does not wait. Stages such as deciding and then acting do not apply to him. Everything exists in God as a single, complete whole. Here, God's knowledge is also not limited by time. Past, present, and future are not separate moments for God, while humans see the future as something not yet lived. For God, the future is already known. Knowing does not require time for God. In this understanding, God is considered unchanging. Change requires time. If something changes, it moves from one state to another. God does not move from one state to another. He is always as He is. What changes is the universe, not God. God's independence from time also means independence from the beginning of the universe. Even if the universe has a beginning, there is no moment called before for God. Time may have emerged together with the universe. But God is not dependent on the emergence of time. This view also interprets the question of why God does not intervene differently. God is not a being who intervenes at one moment and then withdraws. What appears as intervention to humans already exists as part of God's timeless knowledge. God's independence from time does not make him a distant observer of the universe. On the contrary, all of time exists simultaneously within God's knowledge. Humans look from within time. God looks from outside of it. In this approach, the question, "When did God create?" loses its meaning. The question when applies only to beings within time. For God, creation is not an event that occurs at a moment, but a timeless act. According to this view, God exists. Time does not carry God. Time gains meaning within God's existence. 32. The existence of the universe by God's will. According to this view, the universe did not arise on its own. Its existence is the result of a conscious and purposeful will. This will belongs to God. The universe is not a collection of coincidences, but a willed existence. Here, God's will is not understood in the same way as human will. Human will makes decisions with incomplete knowledge. God's will is based on complete knowledge. The entire structure, laws, and limits of the universe exist in accordance with this will. In this understanding, the universe cannot exist without God's will. Matter, energy, time, and space are not sufficient by themselves. They owe their existence to God's desire for them to exist. The universe exists as a result of God's will. It is not necessary, but chosen. In a universe that exists by God's will, order is not seen as accidental. Physical laws, constants, and balances are interpreted as conscious choices. The fact that the universe functions is seen as a sign that this will is still in effect. This view does not see God as a being forced to create the universe. God does not need to create. The universe does not complete any lack in God. The existence of the universe arises not from God's need, but from His will. Here, creation is not limited to a single beginning. God's will includes not only the emergence of the universe, but also its continued existence. If the universe continues to exist at every moment, this is understood as the continuation of that will. In this understanding, the answer to the question, "Why does the universe exist?" is clear, because God willed it to exist. One cannot go further back. Will is the final point of explanation. According to this view, God exists, and the universe is a conscious result of that existence. The universe is explained, but the reason for God's will is not. Thought stops there. 33. God as the source of morality. According to this view, morality is not a system produced by humans on their own. The distinction between good and evil is not seen as a random set of rules created by the human mind. The origin of morality is grounded in God. What is right because God wills it. In this understanding, moral values are not relative. Customs that change over time and across societies are not considered the essence of morality. True morality is based on a fixed measure that comes from God. Humans may interpret it, misunderstand it, or violate it, but the measure itself does not change. Here, God is not merely an authority who sets rules. Morality is seen as a reflection of God's nature. Good exists because God is good. Justice has meaning because God is just. Compassion, truth, and responsibility are grounded in God's existence. In this view, the question, why should we be good, holds an important place. The answer is not limited to social benefit or personal interest. Being good means living in accordance with the order established by God. Morality is understood as a principle embedded in the functioning of the universe. God, being the source of morality, also explains human conscience. Conscience is not seen as a random feeling. Humans internally sense the moral measure that comes from God. Conscience is interpreted as a reflection of God within the human being. In this perspective, morality is not limited to relationships between people. The relationship between humans and the universe, humans and life, and humans and God also carries moral meaning. Harming nature, committing injustice, or avoiding responsibility is seen not only as a social problem, but as a moral deviation. The idea that God is the source of morality prevents morality from being groundless. If God does not exist, morality is, in this view, merely an agreement. If God exists, morality is necessary and binding. Good and evil move beyond personal preference and become a universal measure. This theory grounds the existence of God through morality. If a moral order exists, it must have a source. God is seen as the source of this order. Morality becomes a sign that points to God. In this approach, God exists and is the fundamental principle that determines not only the universe, but also how humans ought to live. Morality is accepted as God's silent yet constant voice. 34. God's communication with humanity. According to this view, God is not a distant being who withdrew after creating the universe. God is understood as a being who forms a relationship with humanity, addresses humans, and makes himself known through various means. The bond between God and humans is not a one-sided silence, but a meaningful form of communication. In most belief systems, this communication does not occur as direct speech, but through indirect ways. Revelation, inspiration, intuition, conscience, and sacred texts are seen as the instruments of this connection. God reveals himself within the limits humans can comprehend. Rather than showing everything as it is, he offers signs suited to human consciousness. In the concept of revelation, God speaks to humanity through chosen individuals. These individuals are not God themselves. They are intermediaries who carry the message. The message is considered divine, but it is conveyed through human language. For this reason, sacred texts contain both transcendent and human tones together. In some approaches, God's communication is not external, but internal. Conscience plays a central role here. When humans distinguish between right and wrong, this distinction is thought to come not solely from their own reasoning, but from an inner guidance originating from God. God does not speak, but makes himself felt. Nature is also seen as one of the realms through which God communicates with humanity. The order, complexity, and balance of the universe are interpreted as God's silent language. When humans look at the sky, life, and harmony in nature, they perceive God's presence indirectly. In this understanding, God's communication is continuous but not coercive. Humans are left free. God does not impose himself, he points. Understanding or ignoring the signs is the responsibility of the human being. This space of silence is important for preserving free will. In some philosophical interpretations, communication with God is completely independent of words. Humans do not grasp God through thought alone, but feel him within existence itself. The search for meaning, existential questioning, and inner restlessness are seen as gateways to God. In this view, God's communication is not limited to miracles. It can also occur in ordinary moments of daily life. A moment of realization, a pause, or a sense of inner clarity may be considered part of this communication. God's communication with humanity reinforces the idea that God is not indifferent. Humans are not alone. Even if the universe appears silent, it is not entirely meaningless. This communication is accepted as a sign that God cares about humanity. According to this approach, God exists and forms a connection with humans. However, this connection is not loud, clear, or forceful. It is calm, subtle, and open to interpretation. God speaks, but does not shout. Listening depends on human attention. 35. God speaking through prophets. According to this view, God does not speak to humanity directly and continuously. Instead, at certain times, He chooses specific individuals to deliver His message. These individuals are called prophets and are regarded as carriers of communication between God and humans. The key point in the concept of prophethood is that the chosen person does not become divine. The prophet is not God, nor important because of possessing divine power, but because of the responsibility to convey the message accurately. The prophet remains human, yet bears the weight of the message entrusted to them. The reason God chooses this method is associated with the limited nature of human beings. Humans are not capable of directly comprehending divine truth. Therefore, God conveys His message through human language and in forms suited to human experience. The prophet stands at the center of this adaptation. The concept of revelation is fundamental to this theory. Revelation is understood as the transmission of God's knowledge into the consciousness of the prophet. This transmission may be verbal, visual, or intuitive. However, its source is accepted as God, not the personal thoughts of the prophet. In this view, prophets share a common trait. They serve as moral examples. God does not only provide information, but also demonstrates how one should live. The life of the prophet is seen as the practical expression of the message delivered. God's speaking through prophets is historical. Each message is connected to the language, culture, and problems of a specific society. However, it is believed that within this historical context, the message carries universal principles. The message is time-bound, but its meaning is considered timeless. In this approach, God's silence is also intentional. A new prophet is not sent in every era. Humanity is expected to mature, understand previous messages, and take responsibility. A God who does not speak constantly invites humans to think. From a critical perspective, this theory is debated because the message passes through a human filter. The prophet's perception, language, and historical context may shape the form of the message. This leads to an intertwining of the divine and the human. Despite this, the view maintains that God does communicate with humanity and is not completely distant. God speaks, but not to everyone. He speaks selectively, at chosen times, and with responsibility. According to this theory, God exists and guides humanity. Prophets are not the voice itself, but the medium of guidance. The one who truly speaks is God. The prophet is the bridge that carries this voice to the world. 36. God creating the universe with purpose. According to this view, God created the universe not as a random or self-emerging structure, but with a specific purpose. Nothing exists without reason. The existence of the universe serves a goal determined by God's will. This purpose does not have to be clear or easily understood. Humans may observe order, harmony, and functioning in the universe, but cannot fully grasp the ultimate reason behind this order. The purpose exists within God's knowledge and remains largely hidden to humans. In this understanding, natural laws are not coincidences, but tools. Physical rules, the emergence of life, and cosmic order are all seen as methods used to realize this purpose. Rather than intervening directly, God allows the system He established to operate. Humans occupy a special position in this theory. According to the view of purposeful creation, humans are beings capable of understanding, questioning, and seeking meaning. These abilities are interpreted as signs that the universe was established with intention. Concepts such as morality and responsibility are also linked to this perspective. If the universe was created with purpose, human existence is not meaningless. Humans are responsible for their actions because existence has direction. Life is not an accident, but a field of responsibility. From a critical viewpoint, a question arises: purpose for whom? For God, for humans, or for the universe itself? There is no definitive answer. However, this uncertainty does not imply the absence of purpose. This theory argues that God is not indifferent to the universe. God creates, establishes order, and intends this order to carry meaning. The universe is not aimless, it has direction. The question, does God exist? Here merges with the question, does the universe have a purpose? If the universe is directional and meaningful, the idea of a divine will that intends and determines this purpose gains strength. God is understood as the intention behind the universe. 37. God's preservation of the universe. According to this view, God did not abandon the universe after creating it. The universe is not merely a structure that was brought into existence at the beginning, but one that is continuously observed and sustained. The continuation of order, the functioning of laws, and the persistence of existence are associated with God's preserving role. The idea of preservation does not mean constant and direct miracles. God is not understood as a force that intervenes instantly in every event that might disrupt the universe, but as the fundamental support that prevents the established order from collapsing. The stable operation of natural laws is seen as the simplest expression of this preservation. In this understanding, chaos is not completely uncontrolled. Destruction, disasters, and endings are also part of the universal order. God's preservation does not mean that everything remains unchanged. Rather, it means that change does not turn into total annihilation. The universe does not fall apart because there is a will behind it that sustains it. Human beings are also included within this preservation. Despite the fragility of life, existence is not thought to be left entirely to chance. The continuation of life, the emergence of conscious beings, and the long-term stability of the universe are explained through God's oversight. In this view, God is not a distant or indifferent creator. He provides the foundation necessary for the universe to continue existing. However, this preservation does not eliminate human freedom. God preserves, but does not determine every outcome in advance. A critical perspective questions this idea through suffering and disorder. If God preserves the universe, why does destruction exist? According to this theory, preservation does not mean absolute safety. It means that existence does not completely disappear. The universe remains standing, but it is not perfect. In this approach, God is like the silent guardian of the universe. Invisible, yet if his absence were felt, everything would collapse. The fact that the universe still exists is seen as the strongest sign of this preservation. The question, does God exist, is linked here to the question, why does the universe still endure? If existence does not collapse on its own, it is thought that there is a divine principle preserving it. God is understood as the unseen foundation behind the continuity of the universe. 38. According to this view, God knows and determines everything that will happen in the universe in advance. No event is accidental. Human life, from birth to death, unfolds within God's knowledge and will. In this understanding, destiny is not the sum of coincidences, but the result of a divine order. The idea of destiny is often confused with compulsion. However, according to this theory, God's determination of destiny does not mean that humans are completely without free will. Humans make choices, take decisions, and bear responsibility. Yet all of these choices exist within God's knowledge. God knows, but humans choose. In this perspective, time is not a limitation for God. Past, present, and future exist together within God's knowledge. What is not yet experienced for humans is already known for God. Therefore, destiny is not about God's external intervention, but about His timeless knowledge. The concept of destiny is used to explain order in the universe. Small details, as well as major events, are part of this order. Encounters, separations, and unexpected moments are not random, but elements of a meaningful flow. This theory gives humans both comfort and challenge. It gives comfort because life is not chaotic. It creates challenge because it raises the question of how suffering and injustice can be explained through destiny. At this point, destiny does not claim that everything is good, but that everything has meaning. Critical approaches argue that the idea of destiny weakens freedom. If everything is predetermined, how is responsibility possible? The response is clear. God knows the outcome, but does not force the human being. Knowing is not the same as causing. In this understanding, God is a hidden organizer of life at every moment. Even if events appear random, they are not outside God's knowledge. Humans walk within this order while searching for meaning. The question, does God exist? Here turns into, is life truly random? If an unseen direction and order are felt in life, the idea of a divine will that determines it gains strength. God is considered the source of destiny. 39. God's absolute power. According to this view, God's power is unlimited. The force that brings the universe into existence, establishes its laws, and sustains being is God. No obstacle and no boundary can restrict God's power. Everything that exists or could exist falls within God's power. Absolute power does not mean creating miracles at every moment. God's strength is not shown by constantly breaking natural laws, but by possessing the power to create those laws in the first place. The orderly functioning of the universe is seen not as a weakness of God's power, but as its deliberate use. In this understanding, God is not dependent on the universe. The universe depends on God, not the other way around. Existence does not stand on its own power, but is sustained by God's will. If God wills it, everything that exists can change or come to an end. The idea of absolute power becomes clearer through human limitation. Humans strive, plan, and encounter boundaries. God, however, is not defined by limits. This distinction forms the fundamental separation between God and what is created. In this view, God's power is considered together with justice and wisdom. Absolute power is not arbitrary power. Even though God is capable of everything, He does not do everything. He uses His power within purpose, order, and meaning. A critical question arises. If God has absolute power, why does evil exist? According to this theory, power does not require preventing every outcome. God's power exists alongside freedom and order. In this understanding, God is the most fundamental power behind the universe. Every cause ultimately rests on this power. The universe is not self-sufficient. It draws its strength from another source. The question, does God exist? Here merges with what is the ultimate foundation of existence. If an unlimited power is sought behind everything, this power is understood as God. God is not power itself, but the source of all power. 40. God establishing a system of testing. According to this view, God has structured the universe and human life as a system of testing. Life is not a random sequence of events, but a process in which a person reveals who they are through their choices. Difficulties, opportunities, and moments of decision are all parts of this test. The core of the idea of testing is freedom. Humans are not forced or directed, they choose. The ability to decide between good and evil, right and wrong, is deliberately given to human beings. God sets the test, but the answers are written by the individual. In this understanding, inequality in life is not seen as a flaw, but as part of the nature of the test. Not everyone is born into the same conditions. Some are given strength, others hardship. The test is about how each person acts within their own circumstances. God's system of testing is considered together with the idea of justice. Even if results are not realized in this world, the final evaluation takes place later. Life is a process of assessment. The outcome appears at the end of this process. This theory also gives meaning to pain and suffering. Difficulties are interpreted not as punishment, but as areas of testing. Values such as patience, compassion, and honesty can only emerge within a trial. A critical perspective argues that the idea of testing struggles to explain innocent suffering. The response is this: the test is not only individual, but collective. People are also tested by how they respond to the suffering of others. In this understanding, God is not an inspector who constantly intervenes in life, but a regulator who establishes the conditions. He creates the field, sets the rules, and leaves the moves to human beings. The question, does God exist? Here connects to the question, why is life filled with choices? If life gains meaning through conscious decisions, it is thought that behind this order, there is a divine will that established the idea of testing. God is the power that gives meaning to life as an examination. 41. God's justice. According to this view, God governs the universe not only with power, but with justice. No action goes unanswered, and no injustice completely disappears. The balance that is invisible to humans is completed in God's justice. Divine justice does not mean that everything is immediately balanced in this world. Good deeds may sometimes go unrewarded, and evil may appear unpunished. In this view, justice unfolds over time. What feels like delay for humans is not a deficiency for God. In this understanding, justice is not absolute equality, but absolute fairness. Not every person is judged under the same conditions. Intention, capacity, knowledge, and necessity are taken into account. God looks not at outward results, but at inner orientation. God's justice is considered together with destiny and free will. Humans are responsible for their actions because they are able to choose. Even if God knows in advance, responsibility belongs to the individual. Justice is built upon this responsibility. This view connects the foundation of moral order to God. If there is no ultimate justice, injustices become permanent. The idea of divine justice preserves the belief that there is a moral balance in the universe. A critical approach questions how innocent suffering can be reconciled with justice. According to this theory, justice is not only individual, but holistic. Even if humans cannot see it, everything is ultimately tied to a final reckoning. In this understanding, God is not a partisan judge, but one who encompasses all. Closeness, power, or status do not influence God's justice. The measure is fixed, and the evaluation is complete. The question, does God exist? Here turns into, does anyone truly leave without facing the consequences of their actions? If there is an unseen yet deeply felt expectation of justice in the universe, the source of this expectation is understood as divine justice. God is the justice that delivers the final word. 42. God's mercy. According to this view, God is defined not only by justice, but also by mercy. Human beings are imperfect, make mistakes, and are often weak. God's mercy is seen as a divine approach that takes this limited nature into account. Mercy is not the opposite of justice. In this understanding, mercy is a principle that softens and balances justice. God does not punish every mistake in the harshest way. Intention, remorse, and effort fall within the domain of mercy. God's mercy is continuous. It is open not only to great acts of goodness, but also to small turns and changes. Humans always have the possibility to realign themselves. The door is never completely closed. This is a central idea that prevents despair. In this view, mercy forms the foundation of God's relationship with humanity. People approach God not through fear, but through hope. A mistake is not seen as something that ends the relationship, but as a condition that can be repaired. A critical perspective questions whether mercy weakens justice. According to this theory, God's mercy is not arbitrary. Mercy does not remove responsibility. It opens a space for return. The understanding of mercy is also reflected in human behavior. If God is merciful, humans are expected to be merciful as well. A divine attribute becomes a moral example. In this approach, God is not only an authority who judges, but a being who understands and is open to forgiveness. Humans are not completely alone before God. The question, does God exist? Here merges with the question, why does the human being need forgiveness? If human nature is prone to error and yet seeks hope, that hope gains meaning through the idea of God's mercy. God is the very possibility of forgiveness. 43. God placing humanity at the center. According to this view, God placed human beings in a special position when establishing the universe. Humans are not merely living creatures that emerged within the cosmos. They are beings endowed with meaning and consciousness. Though small within the vastness of the universe, they hold a central place in God's attention. Placing humanity at the center does not necessarily mean that the universe was created solely for humans. Rather, it is linked to the fact that humans are the only beings capable of understanding the universe and giving it meaning. Consciousness, inquiry, and moral judgment form the foundation of this central position. In this understanding, God enters into a relationship with humans. Commands, warnings, guidance, and responsibility are all directed toward humanity. Nature exists, order exists, but the one being addressed is the human. This makes humans both valuable and accountable. God's centering of humanity brings not only privilege, but also burden. Humans are not merely protected, they are held accountable. Consciousness carries responsibility along with freedom. For this reason, the human position is not a comfortable center, but a place that requires careful awareness. A critical perspective argues that this view elevates humanity too much. In the face of the universe's vastness, the claim that humans are central is questioned. According to this theory, the center is not physical, but meaningful. Humans are not at the center of the universe, but at the center of meaning. In this understanding, God did not create humans by chance. Humans are seen as conscious addressees. Being the only beings capable of forming a relationship with God distinguishes them from all other entities. The question, does God exist? Here connects to the question, why is the human being so heavily invested with meaning? If humans are more than mere biological outcomes, the idea of a divine center that gives this meaning emerges. God is conceived as the consciousness that addresses humanity. 44. God giving meaning to the universe. According to this view, God is not only the creator of the universe, but also the source that gives it meaning. The universe's matter, motion, and laws do not by themselves provide a complete explanation. Meaning arises with the question of why this order exists. The idea of God is the answer given to this question. Here, meaning is not physical, but existential. Stars revolve, time flows, life emerges. Yet the question of why remains incomplete without the concept of God. In this understanding, God gives direction and context to the silent functioning of the universe. The universe is seen not as a meaningless mechanism, but as a structure established with purpose. The fact that everything appears to be in its proper place creates a sense of order beyond mere chance. God is thought of as the principle that grants meaning behind this order. Humans are the only beings capable of recognizing this meaning. The universe does not know its own meaning. Humans ask the question. This capacity for inquiry is associated with the meaning given by God. The meaning of the universe is revealed within human consciousness. In this view, God does not need to intervene constantly in the universe. Meaning was given at the beginning. Laws operate, processes continue. Yet all of this is not an empty flow, but parts of a meaningful whole. An opposing view claims that meaning is produced by humans. It argues that the universe itself has no purpose, and that meaning is a mental necessity. This theory, however, states that meaning is not invented, but discovered. Humans do not fabricate meaning. They recognize what God has given. The idea that God gives meaning to the universe centers on the question, why do we exist? If the universe simply happened, meaning is added afterward. If God exists, meaning exists from the beginning. At this point, God is not seen as a concept that fills gaps, but as the framework of existence itself. Within the silence of the universe, God is the invisible center that carries meaning. 45. God as a transcendent being. According to this view, God is not a being located within the universe or entirely bound to it. God is transcendent, existing beyond limits, time and space. Although the universe may appear independent of God, its existence ultimately arises from God's transcendence. Transcendence places God beyond human experience. God cannot be seen, measured, or fully comprehended. God determines the order, laws, and existence of the universe, yet is not confined within that order. For this reason, God stands in a dimension distinct from all created things. Human understanding of God is limited. Experiencing God does not mean directly perceiving this transcendent nature. Humans can only observe God's effects, the order He established, and the meaning He provides. Transcendence is also an expression of God's independence and absoluteness. In this understanding, the existence of the universe is connected to God's transcendent will. The universe depends on God, but God is not contained within it. This perspective elevates God beyond mere power and force. God's transcendence also challenges the limits of human imagination and understanding. The reason for the universe's existence and the origin of order point toward a transcendent being. Humans cannot see God directly, but existence itself carries the trace of a transcendent power. This theory defines God as both unreachable and continuously related to the universe. God stands beyond the universe, yet remains the cause of everything that exists. 46. God leaving traces in the universe. According to this view, although God does not appear directly in the universe, He leaves traces of His existence. The order of creation, the laws of nature, the complexity of life, and the harmony of the cosmos are seen as God's silent signature. By observing these traces, humans recognize that the universe is not the result of pure chance, but of an underlying order. God's traces are different from direct intervention. They do not appear through miracles or sudden events, but through long and consistent processes. The orbits of planets, the intricate structure of life, and the order of subatomic particles are all reflections of these invisible traces. By following these traces, humans may intuit the existence of God, reason. Science and observation are seen as paths that lead toward these transcendent signs. While the complexity and order of the universe point to a creator, God does not reveal Himself in an overly explicit way. This subtlety is consistent with His transcendence. God's traces also remind humans of responsibility. The order of the universe does not merely exist, it carries meaning and connection. As humans become aware of these traces, they gain the possibility of living in harmony with nature and the cosmos. In this approach, God works like an invisible artist. He does not display the brush itself, but the artwork bears his marks in every detail. By reading these traces, humans develop insight into the origin of the universe and sense the transcendent presence of God. 47. The impossibility of God's non-existence. According to this theory, God is a being whose existence is necessary. His non-existence cannot be conceived. The existence, order, and meaning of the universe cannot be explained without God. God is not merely a possibility, but a fundamental condition of existence itself. The absence of God would require the absence of the universe as well. For this reason, God is understood as an independent and necessary being without beginning or end. He is the source of all causes and order, the foundational reality that defines the boundary between being and non-being. It is possible for the human mind to deny God, but this denial is seen as philosophically inconsistent. The complexity of the universe, the order of its laws, and the emergence of life all demand an explanation. At the foundation of this explanation lies the concept of a necessarily existing God. The impossibility of God's non-existence also shapes humanity's place in the universe. Humans are not seen as accidental beings, but as parts of a conscious order. In this view, God stands silently at the foundation of everything as a transcendent and necessary being. In conclusion, God cannot not exist. Existence itself points toward God's necessary being. The quiet order of the universe, the complexity of life, and consciousness are seen as signs that God's absence is impossible. 48. God as a necessary being. This view defines God not merely as a being that exists, but as a being that must exist. God's existence depends on no condition. It is self-sufficient and unavoidable. The existence and order of the universe are seen as reflections of this necessity. A necessary being is one whose non-existence cannot be conceived. The question of why the universe exists is answered through God's necessary nature. He is the foundation of all causes and effects, the precondition for anything to exist. For this reason, God is understood as a being without beginning or end. Humans cannot directly experience God's necessary existence, but the order of the universe, the complexity of life, and the logic of existence itself point toward this necessity. In this approach, God is invisible within the universe, yet felt at the foundation of every event. The concept of a necessary being places God beyond chance. He is the source of a universe that is not random, but grounded and meaningful. By sensing this necessity, humans attempt to understand their place in the universe and the origin of existence. In conclusion, God is a necessary, transcendent being without beginning. The order of the universe and existence itself can be seen as silent yet continuous evidence of this necessary being. 49. The unknowability of God. According to this theory, God exists beyond the limits of human reason and perception. God's nature is an infinite, transcendent reality, and therefore cannot be fully grasped or measured. Although humans attempt to understand God, their mental limitations and modes of experience prevent them from knowing His true essence. Unknowability does not imply God's absence. On the contrary, it points to a form of existence that surpasses human understanding. The complexity of the universe, the order of life, and the balance found in nature suggest God's existence. Yet these signs can only be approached through intuition and observation. God's true essence cannot be fully revealed or directly experienced by humans. This perspective reshapes how humans relate to God, rather than comprehending Him directly. Humans develop an intuitive understanding by observing His effects and the order He has established. Unknowability makes God inaccessible in essence, but it also highlights his transcendence and greatness. In conclusion, God remains a mystery to humanity. His unknowability signals that he is the source of a power and order beyond human reach. Even if humans cannot fully understand God, they can sense his presence through the traces he leaves in the universe and in life itself. 50. Knowing God through faith. This view argues that God's existence cannot be fully proven through reason or empirical experience, but can be known through faith. Humans cannot observe or measure God. Instead, they approach him through belief felt in the mind and the heart. Faith creates a direct connection between God and the human being, allowing his presence to be sensed. Faith is not mere acceptance, but a form of inner experience. When humans observe the order of nature, the complexity of life, and the harmony of the universe, they may intuit that this order has a creator. This intuition opens the way to a kind of knowledge beyond pure reason, sensing God's existence. In this approach, God is not visible, but he is felt. Faith allows humans to move beyond their limited perception and opens a path to knowing God through inner awareness and reflection. Although God's existence cannot be directly experienced, it can be lived and recognized through faith. In conclusion, the way to know God is not through proof or logic alone, but through faith. Faith forms an invisible bridge between God and humanity, through which humans can sense and experience God's presence. 51. The ontological argument for God. The ontological argument is a philosophical approach that attempts to explain God's existence through thought alone. According to this theory, God is defined as the greatest conceivable being, and absolute perfection necessarily includes existence. Therefore, God's existence is considered a logical necessity. He is the most complete being that can be conceived by reason. In this approach, there is no need to prove God through observation or experiment. God's definition already contains existence within it. If God is the greatest possible being, his non-existence cannot be conceived. Existence is not an added feature, but an essential part of his perfection. The ontological argument claims that humans can reach God through reasoning. The mind can grasp God's necessary existence, and logic shows that his absence is impossible. In this sense, God is known not only through faith, but also as a rational necessity. In conclusion, the ontological approach presents God as a necessary being at the foundation of both thought and existence. God's existence is understood as a logical requirement, and his perfect nature is something the human intellect can conceptually grasp. 52. The cosmological argument for God. The cosmological argument seeks to explain God's existence through the existence and order of the universe. According to this theory, everything that exists has a cause, and the universe is no exception. Since the universe cannot have brought itself into existence, there must be a first cause that initiated everything: God. The order of the universe, the complex structures found in nature, and the delicate balance that allows life to exist are interpreted as signs of an intentional order, rather than mere chance. The cosmological argument presents God not only as the creator of the beginning, but also as the source of the fundamental laws that govern the universe. In this view, God exists beyond the universe while remaining connected to it. His non-existence is inconceivable because he is the ultimate cause of all things. By observing cause and effect relationships and natural order, humans can infer the existence of God. In conclusion, the cosmological argument presents God as the necessary origin of the universe and the source of its order. The existence, structure, and causality of the universe offer a rational and philosophical foundation for belief in God's existence. 53. The teleological design argument. The teleological argument claims that the order and complexity found in the universe point point to an intelligent design. The delicate balance of natural systems, the harmonious structures of living beings, and the conditions that make life possible suggest the presence of purposeful order rather than mere chance. In this view, God is the designer who plans and sustains the universe. The structure of Earth, the movement of planets, and the complex biological systems of living organisms all carry traces of conscious organization. By observing this order, the human mind can intuit the existence of a creator. The teleological argument does not present God only as the initiator of the universe, but also as the source of its ongoing harmony. The coherence found in nature appears less like a random outcome and more like something guided by intention and purpose. In conclusion, the teleological approach defines God as the conscious designer of the universe. By observing the universe's order and complexity, humans can sense God's intelligence and creative will. 54. The first cause argument. The first cause argument holds that everything in the universe has a cause, and that this chain of causes cannot be infinite. Every event and every being depends on something else. Therefore, there must be an initial cause that exists independently and depends on nothing else. This first cause is identified as God, the origin, order, and motion of the universe. Since nothing can begin entirely on its own, the universe is understood to have emerged not spontaneously, but through a conscious or necessary cause. This first cause exists beyond time and space and serves as the ultimate source of all existence. This theory presents God not only as a creator, but as a necessary being underlying all causal relationships in the universe. By examining cause and effect and reflecting on the universe's beginning, humans can intuit the existence of this first cause. In conclusion, the first cause argument places God as the necessary origin and foundational source of everything that exists. The universe's existence, order, and causality support the idea of God as a transcendent and indispensable reality. 55. The necessary being thesis. The necessary being thesis explains God as a being whose existence is self-contained and whose non-existence is impossible. According to this view, all entities in the universe are contingent. They may exist or may not. At some point, however, there must be a being whose existence is not optional or dependent. This being is God. The existence of the universe and everything within it rests upon this necessary being. By observing change, causality, and the temporary nature of things, the human mind can infer the presence of an eternal and necessary reality. God is not only the initiator of existence, but a being whose existence is inherent and unavoidable. In this thesis, God is more than the cause of the universe. He is the fundamental logic of existence itself. The universe's continuity, order, and existence all point back to this necessary being. In conclusion, the necessary being thesis presents God as the foundation upon which all possibilities depend. God's existence is self-sustaining, unavoidable, and transcendent, and everything that exists is ultimately connected to this fundamental reality. 56. The logical necessity of God. The logical necessity of God argues that God's existence is necessary and that his non-existence is logically impossible. According to this view, everything in the universe exists within a framework of causality and order. Yet this order cannot fully explain itself. At this point, a God whose existence is necessary emerges as a logical requirement. God is not only a creator, but also the foundational logic of existence and order. As the human mind examines the structure of the universe, chains of cause and effect, and the interconnected nature of all beings, it can intuit this necessary and logically indispensable existence. God transcends the universe while remaining connected to it. His absence cannot be coherently conceived, yet his existence can be grasped through reason. In conclusion, The logical necessity approach defines God as a being whose existence is inherently necessary and who establishes the logic and order of the universe. The meaning and existence of everything ultimately rest upon this logical necessity. 57. The moral argument for God. The moral argument connects the existence of morality and value systems in the universe to the existence of God. As humans experience concepts of good and evil, right and wrong, they may sense that such distinctions cannot arise by chance alone. Moral order requires a source, and this source is identified as God. In this view, God is not only a creator, but also a guide who establishes moral standards for both the universe and humanity. Human conscience functions like an inner law or compass, directing individuals toward what is right. This inner compass carries traces of God's existence. The universal and binding nature of moral values points to a higher consciousness and organizing source. In conclusion, the moral argument presents God as the source of goodness and moral order, and as the foundation of human conscience and values. Moral experience allows humans to sense God's existence and gives meaning to human life. 58. The problem of evil questions the tension between the existence of God and the presence of suffering, injustice, and evil in the world. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly good, why does suffering and evil exist? This question stands at the core of theological and philosophical inquiry. Some thinkers argue that evil can be explained through free will. Humans are free, and their choices can lead to suffering and wrongdoing. Other perspectives suggest that pain serves as a means of learning, growth, or spiritual development. In this view, evil does not directly deny God's existence. Instead, it may be part of a plan that exceeds human understanding. In conclusion, the problem of evil highlights the delicate balance between God's nature and human experience. Suffering and injustice are not necessarily evidence against God's existence, but may suggest that the universe is ordered in ways that transcend human comprehension. 59. Arguments against the existence of God. Arguments against the existence of God question either his non-existence or the improbability of his existence. These arguments often focus on the presence of evil in the universe, logical contradictions, and the idea that natural laws alone can explain order and structure. By examining causality and natural processes, some argue that the universe can be explained without reference to God. Certain philosophers discuss logical tensions in God's attributes. For example, how an all-knowing and all-powerful being can coexist with human free will. Other approaches claim that the universe could arise through spontaneous or random processes, making a creator unnecessary. In conclusion, arguments against the existence of God reveal the boundaries between faith and reason. Rather than definitively disproving God, these discussions illuminate the limits of human thought and the ongoing effort to understand the universe. 60. The thesis of God's non-existence. The thesis of God's non-existence argues that the universe and life can be explained without reference to God. According to this view, natural laws, physical processes, and evolutionary mechanisms are sufficient to account for the order and complexity of the universe. The concept of God is seen as an idea that emerged from humanity's attempt to cope with the unknown. This thesis is especially prominent in scientific and philosophical thought. The formation of the universe, the emergence of life, and natural phenomena can be explained through chance, necessity, and natural processes. Morality and the search for meaning are interpreted as products of human consciousness, rather than divine origin. In conclusion, the thesis of God's non-existence considers an appeal to a transcendent being unnecessary for explaining reality. The universe can exist and function according to its own laws and processes without requiring the existence of God. 61. Agnosticism argues that it is not possible to possess certain knowledge about the existence or non-existence of God. According to this view, the human mind cannot reach a final judgment on matters such as the origin of the universe, the meaning of life, or the nature of God, since there is no definitive evidence regarding God or any divine being. These questions remain within a permanent realm of uncertainty. Agnostics neither definitively accept nor deny the existence of God. Instead, they place questioning and doubt at the center. This approach highlights the boundary between belief and knowledge and acknowledges the limitations of human understanding when it comes to comprehending the universe. In conclusion, agnosticism avoids giving a clear answer to the question of God, yet keeps the question open to thought and investigation. The unknown nature of the universe continually sustains human curiosity and the drive to question. 62. Deism. Deism accepts that the universe was created by a creator, but does not view this creator as a being who continuously intervenes in the universe. God is seen as having set the universe in motion, like a clock, establishing its laws and order, and then refraining from interfering in human affairs or natural events. According to this view, natural laws operate independently, and human life is not subject to God's ongoing will. Deism rejects miracles and supernatural interventions. The order and functioning of the universe are understood as the natural outcome of the laws God established at the beginning. In conclusion, Deism recognizes God as the creative source of the universe, but does not position him as an intervening presence in human life. God remains the initiating point that left traces in the structure of the universe, while everything that follows unfolds according to natural laws. 63. Pantheism. Pantheism holds that God is identical with the universe. According to this view, God is not a separate being, but rather the totality of nature, the universe, and all existence. Every mountain, river, star, and living being is seen as a different manifestation of God. The universe itself is regarded as sacred and divine. In pantheism, God is not experienced as a creator outside the universe, but as the immanent spirit or essence within it. By observing nature, humans can sense God. Worship and prayer become ways of living in harmony with the universe. In conclusion, pantheism unites God with the universe and removes the boundary between the divine and the natural. God can be perceived everywhere in existence. Sacredness and being are present in every particle of the universe. 64. Panentheism accepts that God exists within the universe, but does not limit God solely to it. According to this view, God is present in the universe and encompasses it, while also existing beyond it. The universe is a part of God, but God is not confined entirely to the universe. This understanding presents God as both immanent and transcendent. The order of the universe, the flow of life, and the laws of nature are immanent expressions of God's presence. Yet God also exists beyond the universe, in a dimension of mystery and wholeness. Panentheism helps humans understand their connection to nature and the cosmos through God. In conclusion, panentheism portrays God as a force experienced within the universe, while also reminding us of his transcendent existence beyond it. God is both within us and beyond us. 65. The identity of God with nature. This view identifies God directly with the universe and nature itself. Every river, tree, mountain, and star is considered a manifestation of God. God is not an external creator separate from the universe, but the universe itself and the way it functions. Nature is the visible expression of a divine whole. The order, rhythm, and harmony found in nature are seen as reflections of God's existence. By observing nature, humans can attempt to understand God. Reverence and devotion become forms of awareness directed toward the universe itself. In this perspective, God is experienced as an immanent presence rather than a transcendent one. In conclusion, the boundary between God and nature disappears. Every part of the universe is regarded as sacred and divine. Seeking God becomes equivalent to understanding nature and living in harmony with it. 66. God as a product of the human mind. According to this view, God does not emerge as an independent being separate from the universe, but as a product of human consciousness and cultural experience. Faced with uncertainty, death, chaos, and questions about the meaning of life, humans seek security and order. The concept of God takes shape as a symbol and mental construct that responds to these needs. Different societies and cultures create their own images of God based on their values and experiences. God's attributes are shaped by human fears, hopes, and ideals. This understanding interprets God's existence in a metaphorical framework, not as a transcendent being with supernatural powers, but as a creation of the human mind. In conclusion, God is a concept that emerges within human consciousness and is not considered independent of human thought. Belief is understood as a social and psychological structure that fulfills humanity's search for meaning and its need for inner order. 67. God as a linguistic concept. This view argues that the concept of God primarily exists through language. God is shaped within human thought and linguistic use. Names, attributes, and narratives are the means by which God is expressed. When people speak about God, they define him according to their own mental and cultural frameworks. Language makes it possible to understand and share ideas about God, yet it is also limited. God's true nature remains beyond the words used. Language merely offers a window through which God can be approached and discussed. This perspective does not see God as a fixed or singular being, but as a concept that is continuously reshaped by culture and society. In conclusion, God exists through human language and thought. Understanding God is closely tied to the limits of language and the structure of the human mind. God remains both expressed and continually reinterpreted as an idea within the universe. 68. God as a metaphysical principle. This view understands God not as a personal being, but as a metaphysical principle that makes the order and existence of the universe possible. God is an abstract foundation that underlies all beings and provides the logic and structure of reality. The functioning of the universe, natural laws, and the order of existence are seen as manifestations of this principle. God is not a directly intervening or observing entity. Rather, God is a principle inherent in existence itself. By observing the structure, logic, and order of the universe, humans can grasp this divine principle. This understanding presents God as both transcendent and universally present as a metaphysical reality. In conclusion, God is understood not as a personal figure, but as the fundamental principle that enables existence. God is both the source of all being and the metaphysical order that sustains the continuity of the universe. 69. God as the source of consciousness. This view considers God as the fundamental source of consciousness and awareness in the universe. Human consciousness, life in nature, and the order of the cosmos are seen as reflections or expressions of God's existence. God does not only give rise to physical reality, but also enables the emergence of consciousness, intelligence, and awareness. In this understanding, God is connected to the immanent order of the universe. Every thought, feeling, and form of life carries a trace of God as the source of consciousness. Humans and other living beings experience this conscious force, and through it gain insights into the meaning of the universe. In conclusion, God is not only a creator, but also the origin of consciousness and awareness. All living beings sense God's presence through consciousness and form a connection with this fundamental nature. 70. God as universal mind. This view defines God as a universal intelligence that represents the logic, order, and rationality of the universe. Natural laws, planetary motions, the complex structures of living beings, and cosmic harmony are reflections of this universal mind. God is not an intervening force, but the fundamental intelligence that sustains coherence and balance in all things. Human reason is seen as a part or reflection of this universal mind. Human thought and discovery are efforts to understand the underlying order and logic of the universe. God remains present as a constant principle or guide within reality. The universe operates not through randomness, but through intelligible order. In conclusion, God is understood not as a personal being, but as a universal intelligence that embodies the order and reason of existence. The complexity of the universe is the visible and experiential expression of this foundational mind. 71. God considered together with time. This view approaches the concept of God not only as a universal and transcendent being, but also in relation to time. God is understood in connection with all processes of the universe extending from past to future. Creation, change, and the flow of events form the framework of God's presence and influence. Time makes it possible for humans to experience God's actions and order. God's actions and will appear within time, and throughout history, people observe this presence through events and experiences. However, God is not limited by time alone. God is also conceived as a power that exists beyond time. This allows God to be understood as both immanent and transcendent. In conclusion, when God is considered in relation to time, God is understood alongside the flow and transformation of the universe. Time serves as a medium through which God's presence is experienced, while God remains both within time and beyond it. 72. The problem of meaning in the absence of God. This view argues that God's existence is directly connected to the meaning and order of the universe. If God does not exist, the fundamental purpose, values, and direction of the universe and life become uncertain. Moral standards, the meaning of destiny, and the reason for existence become debatable. Everything appears to be left to chance and randomness. The absence of God affects not only the universe, but also the human search for meaning. As people question their existence, actions, and relationships, they may encounter emptiness and uncertainty. This perspective treats God not merely as a metaphysical principle, but as the source of universal meaning. In conclusion, the absence of God raises a profound question about the meaning of the universe and human life. God is seen not only as a creator, but also as a guide of existence and the foundation of universal meaning. 73. God in existentialism. Existentialism addresses the concept of God in the context of human freedom and responsibility. According to this view, the existence or non-existence of God does not determine the meaning of human life. Meaning is constructed through individual choices and actions. God does not provide a universal order or predetermined destiny. Existence begins with the human who takes responsibility. Some existentialist thinkers view the absence of God as both a freedom and a burden for humanity. In this void, humans must create their own values, purposes, and meanings. In this perspective, God is not an external authority, but a source of uncertainty that confronts individuals with the task of discovering their own existence. In conclusion, in existentialism, God is not a power that determines the meaning of existence, but an idea that reveals the framework of human freedom and self-created meaning. 74. The silence of God. The silence of God has been a deep subject of inquiry in many religious and philosophical approaches. This view accepts the existence of God, yet holds that God does not communicate directly with humans or intervene openly. Silence is understood not as absence, but as a conscious distance and mystery. God makes his presence felt, but his intervention remains unseen. This silence compels humans to shape their lives through their own will and responsibility. Prayers, worship, and rituals are attempts to reach God. When no response is perceived, people are left to discover God's meaning and presence through their own experience. Silence also confronts humans with the universe, nature, and their own consciousness. In conclusion, the silence of God is not a sign of absence, but an invitation for humans to reflect and give meaning to their own lives. This silence highlights not the limits of God's existence, but human freedom and responsibility. 75. Philosophical uncertainty. Philosophical uncertainty holds that it is impossible to reach definitive knowledge about the existence or non-existence of God. This approach places both believers and skeptics within the same question: does God truly exist or not? Because human reason is limited and bound to experience, it cannot arrive at a final answer. Uncertainty does not render God entirely distant. Rather, it compels continuous reflection on the boundaries of God's existence or absence, as humans attempt to balance faith, reason, and experience. The idea of God remains both an unknown and an ongoing subject of inquiry. In conclusion, philosophical uncertainty does not eliminate God, but reveals the limits of human efforts to understand and explain existence. It opens a field of thought filled with curiosity and wonder. 76. Science not needing God. This view argues that the functioning of the universe does not require the concept of God to be understood. Science can explain natural laws through observation, experimentation, and logic. Phenomena such as the movement of stars, the formation of planets, or the origin of life can be understood through natural processes. Within this framework, God is not seen as a necessary explanatory element. However, this approach does not necessarily deny the existence of God. It simply states that the scientific method can operate without appealing to God in order to explain existence. Science cannot answer metaphysical questions, but it can progress in understanding the mechanisms of the universe without relying on the concept of God. In conclusion, the idea that science does not need God highlights the diversity of ways humans explore and understand the universe. God remains not a requirement for explanation, but a subject of belief and philosophical reflection. 77. The sufficiency of natural laws. This theory claims that natural laws alone are sufficient to explain the order and functioning of the universe. Without the need for God, the formation of Earth, the motion of planets, the birth of stars, and the evolution of life can all be explained through internal natural laws. Laws such as gravity, thermodynamics, and chemical reactions are enough to maintain cosmic order without requiring additional divine intervention. The sufficiency of natural laws does not necessarily reject God's existence. Rather, it suggests that order and complexity in the universe can be explained scientifically. Through observation and experimentation, humans can understand events and recognize nature as a self-operating system. In conclusion, this view maintains that natural laws are entirely sufficient to explain how the universe works. God is not a necessity for explanation, but remains a metaphor or object of belief for those seeking meaning beyond scientific understanding. 78. The spontaneous emergence of the universe. This view argues that the universe exists through its own internal dynamics, without the need for a creative will. From the Big Bang onward, matter and energy formed according to physical laws and natural processes. Galaxies, stars, and planets emerged on their own. The order of the universe arose spontaneously through necessary cause-and-effect relationships. Spontaneous emergence does not entirely exclude the idea of God, but it claims that no intervention is required to explain the existence of the universe. This perspective focuses on understanding humanity's place in the universe and its connection to natural laws. In conclusion, the spontaneous emergence of the universe suggests that order and existence can arise through natural processes and internal necessity. God, in this perspective, is not a requirement, but remains a possibility within human philosophical reflection. 79. Chance and the laws of physics. This theory argues that the universe emerged through a combination of random events and physical laws. After the Big Bang, energy and matter came together in unpredictable ways, while forces such as gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear interactions shaped them into galaxies, stars, and planets. Order and chaos emerged through this dual interaction. Chance allows the universe to take unexpected forms, while physical laws limit randomness and provide structure. This view presents the universe as both unpredictable and governed by consistent rules. In conclusion, chance and physical laws together make the natural emergence of the universe possible. The idea that order and complexity can arise on their own without the need for God becomes central in this perspective. 80. The scientific untestability of God. This view holds that the existence or non-existence of God cannot be proven through scientific methods. Science explains nature and the universe through observation, experimentation, and measurement, but metaphysical beings or absolute creative forces lie beyond these limits. God is a concept that cannot be directly observed or measured, and therefore cannot be confirmed as a scientific hypothesis or theory. This does not imply that God does not exist. It simply reveals the boundaries of the scientific method. Faith and philosophical inquiry offer different ways of approaching God, but scientific verification is not one of them. In conclusion, the scientific untestability of God highlights the need to distinguish between science and belief when explaining the universe. God remains a possibility within human thought and belief systems, rather than a scientifically testable entity. 81. The unnecessity of the God hypothesis. This theory argues that the functioning of the universe and the order found in nature do not require the concept of God for explanation. Scientific disciplines, such as physics, chemistry, and biology, can explain many phenomena from the motion of planets to the evolution of life within the framework of their own laws. The order, complexity, and diversity of the universe can arise through natural processes and necessary cause and effect relationships. The unnecessity of the God hypothesis does not reject belief. It simply suggests that God is not a required explanation for understanding the universe. Through observation and reason, humans can comprehend the universe and recognize order in nature without presupposing God. In conclusion, this view maintains that no divine intervention is needed for the universe to function and does not make God a necessary explanation. God remains, in this perspective, not a requirement but a philosophical or theological option. 82. The view that the universe has no purpose. This theory claims that the universe exists without any conscious plan or inherent purpose. Planets, stars, and life forms emerge as a result of natural processes and the necessary interactions of physical laws. The order observed in the universe arises from chance and necessity, without the need for intervention by a higher intelligence. The view of purposelessness can reshape how humans understand their place in the universe and interpret events. Order and complexity can be explained through random processes and natural causes and effects. In this perspective, there is no need to assume God or an absolute plan. The universe forms and operates through its own dynamics. In conclusion, The idea that the universe is purposeless suggests that no divine intervention is required to explain nature and life. The order of the universe emerges as a natural result of necessity and probability. 83. The fine-tuning problem suggests that the physical and cosmic constants that make life possible are balanced with extreme precision. Gravity, electromagnetic force, atomic constants, and other fundamental values could render life impossible with even slight changes. This situation is interpreted by some as evidence that the universe was deliberately tuned by a conscious creator. On the other hand, scientists and philosophers propose alternative explanations, such as the necessity of such values, the possibility of multiple universes, or random formation. The delicate balance observed in the universe may be the result of design or chance. No definitive proof can be established. In conclusion, the fine-tuning problem invites reflection on the complexity of the universe and its suitability for life. The appearance of being tuned opens the door to both divine and natural explanations, without allowing for a definitive conclusion. 84. The multiverse explanation. The multiverse theory proposes that our universe is not unique and that countless other universes may exist. Each universe may have different physical laws, constants, and conditions. While many may be unsuitable for life, our universe happens to possess values that allow life to exist. This approach is often used to explain why the universe appears fine-tuned. If an infinite number of universes exist, the emergence of one that supports life becomes statistically inevitable. Therefore, the complexity and delicate balance of our universe can be explained without invoking conscious design. In conclusion, the multiverse view seeks to explain the order of the universe and the emergence of life without requiring the God hypothesis. While it does not offer definitive proof, it provides a theoretical framework in which the universe can arise through chance and natural processes. 85. God as outside the domain of science. This theory argues that the concept of God cannot be examined through scientific methods. Science relies on observation, experimentation, and measurement, explaining the workings of the universe through empirical data. God, however, is defined in most belief systems as a metaphysical being, absolute power, or consciousness, and cannot be physically measured. As a result, questions about God cannot be answered through scientific experiments or tests. God's existence or non-existence cannot be verified through empirical evidence, and instead belongs to the realm of philosophy, theology, or personal belief. This shows that God is associated not with scientific knowledge, but with faith and thought. In conclusion, viewing God as outside the domain of science highlights that science and belief use different methods to explain reality. Science neither confirms nor denies God. This domain is left to the metaphysical dimension of human thought. 86. The construction of God in human consciousness. This theory proposes that the concept of God is shaped by human consciousness and cultural experience. Throughout history, humans have felt a need for a higher intelligence or creative principle in order to make sense of the universe, life, and their own existence. As a result, God appears in different forms across societies, cultures, and historical periods, reflecting human psychological, emotional, and social needs. According to this view, God is not necessarily an independent, universal being existing outside humanity, but rather a concept constructed within the human mind, a symbol or metaphor that helps people organize meaning. The idea of God functions as a source of security, moral structure, purpose, and order. It provides a mental framework through which individuals cope with uncertainty, suffering, and the limits of human understanding. In conclusion, the theory of God being constructed in consciousness focuses on what the divine represents for humans and how it is conceptualized. God exists as an experience or object of belief within the mind, proof of existence or non-existence is inseparable from human perception and accumulated cultural memory. 87. Evolutionary theory of religion. The evolutionary theory of religion suggests that religion emerged as a result of evolutionary processes within the human mind and social life. Early humans needed ways to interpret their environment in order to survive and maintain social order. Faced with death, natural disasters, and uncertainty, they developed belief systems that offered protection, explanation, and emotional stability. Over time, these systems evolved into rituals, gods, and structured religious traditions. According to this theory, religion functions as a byproduct of biological and cultural evolution. It strengthens group cohesion, reinforces moral norms, and helps individuals cope with stress and fear. The concept of God emerges as part of the brain's search for meaning and pattern recognition, rather than as evidence of an external supernatural reality. In conclusion, the evolutionary theory of religion views religion not as a fixed truth, but as a natural outcome of human evolution and cultural development. The idea of God is understood as a psychological and social mechanism that supports survival, cooperation, and stability within communities. 88. The evolutionary origins of belief in God. This theory argues that belief in God developed as an adaptive trait during human evolution. Humans evolved a tendency to believe in supernatural forces in order to explain complex natural phenomena and confront unknowns such as death and suffering. This tendency enhanced cooperation within groups, reinforced shared values, and increased the chances of collective survival. Over time, the concept of God took many forms across cultures, sometimes as a single creator, sometimes as multiple gods, spirits, or forces of nature. The human brain structured and preserved these beliefs as part of its functions related to meaning-making, fear management, and social bonding. In conclusion, the evolutionary origin of belief in God does not focus on the metaphysical truth of a divine being, but on how such belief emerged naturally within human cognition and society. Faith is seen as an evolutionary tool that provides both emotional security and social order for individuals and groups. 89. The brain's perception of God. This theory suggests that belief in God arises from the way the human brain functions. The brain is designed to interpret complex events, identify cause and effect relationships, and manage uncertainty. In this process, humans develop the idea of a higher intelligence or creative force to explain what lies beyond direct understanding. Research indicates that during prayer, meditation, or religious experiences, specific regions of the brain become active, producing a strong sense of divine presence. The brain creates God as a reference point to support feelings of meaning, control, and emotional safety. In conclusion, the perception of God is not necessarily evidence of an external being, but a subjective experience rooted in neural processes. The human mind constructs the concept of God as part of its effort to understand the universe and cope with the uncertainties of existence. 90. The experience of God in neurotheology examines the neurological foundations of religious experiences and perceptions of God. According to this approach, during prayer, meditation, or mystical states, certain areas of the brain become activated, leading individuals to experience God as if truly present. This experience is understood as a biological process, created by the brain to support meaning, trust, and emotional balance. Studies suggest that the intensity and emotional depth of these experiences reinforce belief systems and make them feel deeply real and enduring. The brain has the capacity to transform abstract and invisible concepts into vivid, personal experiences. In conclusion, neurotheology explains the experience of God as a mental and physical process rather than proof of an external reality. the feeling of God emerges directly from brain structure and function, reflecting humanity's ongoing effort to find meaning and coherence in life. 91. Science's silence toward metaphysics. This theory argues that science, by its very nature, cannot directly answer metaphysical questions. Issues such as the existence of God, the nature of the soul, or the ultimate cause of the universe lie beyond observation and experimentation. Science is concerned only with measurable, observable, and repeatable phenomena. Metaphysical questions fall outside this framework. This silence does not prove or disprove God's existence. Instead, it reveals the limits of the scientific method itself. Within this gap, the human mind continues its search for meaning through philosophy, religion, and personal experience. In conclusion, science's silence does not resolve the question of God, but it allows metaphysical reflection to persist. This silence functions both as a boundary and as an open space that invites deeper human inquiry. 92. The cultural evolution of the concept of God. This theory proposes that belief in God is not a fixed reality, but a concept shaped through cultural and historical processes. Human societies have developed ideas of God over time in order to understand their environment, social structures, and the unknown. Each culture forms its own image of God based on its values, needs, and lived experiences. From ancient myths to monotheistic religions and modern spiritual interpretations, the concept of God continually transforms. This evolution reflects changes in human thought, social organization, and historical conditions. God becomes not only a supernatural figure, but also a product of cultural memory and collective consciousness. In conclusion, the concept of God carries an evolutionary character. It is a continuously reshaped idea that emerges from the depths of human history and cultural experience. 93. Scientific agnosticism holds that it is impossible to reach certain knowledge about the existence or non-existence of God. This perspective remains neutral between belief and disbelief and relies on the principle of verifiability. Since God cannot be directly observed or experimentally tested, science cannot deliver a definitive conclusion. This view emphasizes that metaphysical questions lie beyond the scope of the scientific method. Individuals may choose belief or skepticism, but science itself cannot provide final answers regarding God. In conclusion, scientific agnosticism accepts the limits of knowledge concerning God and suggests that humanity's search for meaning continues not through experiment and observation, but through personal reflection and philosophical thought. 94. The immeasurability of God. This theory argues that God's existence or attributes cannot be measured or verified through numerical or experimental methods. Scientific instruments designed for the physical world are incapable of detecting a metaphysical being. By definition, God exists beyond human senses and beyond the reach of scientific measurement. This does not confirm or deny God's existence. It simply highlights the limits of scientific tools. When faced with what cannot be measured, human understanding turns toward belief, philosophy, and symbolic narratives. In conclusion, the immeasurability of God underscores the boundaries of scientific knowledge and the unresolved nature of metaphysical questions, pushing humans toward alternative ways of seeking meaning. 95. The impossibility of disproving God through science. This theory suggests that God cannot be scientifically disproven. Science deals with phenomena that are observable, measurable, and repeatable. God, as a metaphysical concept, exists beyond these criteria and therefore cannot be tested or falsified through scientific methods. As a result, God remains neither provable nor disprovable within science. Belief operates through faith and interpretation, while science maintains neutrality and acknowledges its own limits. In conclusion, the impossibility of disproving God through science highlights the fundamental difference between belief and empirical knowledge. The question of God lies beyond the scope of scientific inquiry and remains within the domain of philosophical and existential reflection. 96. The inability to prove God through science. This theory argues that the existence of God cannot be conclusively proven through scientific methods. Science works with phenomena that are observable, measurable, and verifiable through experimentation. God, as a metaphysical being, lies outside these criteria and cannot be directly demonstrated through empirical means. This places belief in God not within scientific certainty, but within personal, philosophical, or cultural domains. As the human mind engages with metaphysical questions, faith and philosophical reflection become the primary tools of understanding. In conclusion, the inability to prove God through science highlights the boundary between science and belief, showing that the question of God remains an open, metaphysical issue shaped by human experience and interpretation. 97. The limits of science. This theory emphasizes that science has limitations when addressing God and other metaphysical entities. Science operates on observable, measurable, and repeatable phenomena. Experimental methods cannot directly test metaphysical claims. God, conceived as beyond the universe or beyond human perception, remains outside these boundaries. The limits of science leave gaps in humanity's effort to understand existence. These gaps are often addressed through belief systems, philosophy, and cultural narratives. Where science cannot reach, humans seek meaning through other forms of understanding. In conclusion, the limits of science show that questions about God and metaphysics cannot be resolved through scientific methods alone, and that humanity's search for meaning extends beyond empirical knowledge. 98. The debate on an uncaused universe. This theory questions whether the universe necessarily requires an absolute cause. Some philosophers and scientists argue that everything must have a cause, while others suggest that the universe may exist without a cause by its own nature. This debate is directly connected to the necessity or absence of God. The idea of an uncaused universe challenges the familiar chain of logical causality. If the universe can exist on its own, the hypothesis of God may not be a required explanation. However, this remains an open field for metaphysical and philosophical interpretation. In conclusion, the debate over an uncaused universe shows that the origin of existence and the question of God are approached differently by science and philosophy, and that a definitive answer remains out of reach. 99. The ultimate silence of science. This theory highlights that science remains silent on certain questions, especially metaphysical ones such as the existence of God. Science is limited to observable and testable phenomena. Questions about the ultimate meaning of existence or the presence of a creative force fall beyond its reach. This silence reveals the human need to fill these gaps with meaning, belief, and philosophical reflection. Science explains how the universe functions, but it does not answer why it exists. At this point, metaphysical inquiry begins. In conclusion, the ultimate silence of science shows that questions about God and existence cannot be resolved through scientific proof, and that human understanding in this area is shaped by belief, philosophy, and personal interpretation. 100. Scientific uncertainty. This theory states that certain aspects of the universe and existence cannot be known with certainty through science. Questions about the universe's beginning, its ultimate cause, and its final purpose cannot be fully explained using current scientific methods. Measurements, theories, and models have inherent limits, leaving some questions permanently unresolved. Scientific uncertainty reveals the boundaries humanity encounters while trying to understand the universe. These boundaries create space for metaphysical and philosophical thought and suggest that concepts such as God or creation cannot be entirely dismissed. In conclusion, scientific uncertainty shows that not all mysteries of existence can be solved, and that humanity's search for meaning will always remain partially open. This video comes to an end here. We've explored just one idea from different angles without rushing to a conclusion. There are many more theories like this waiting. Different questions, different perspectives, all meant to be approached slowly and calmly. If this way of thinking felt right to you, you can continue with another video whenever you want. There's no need to hurry. For now, let these thoughts rest. Let them fade as you relax. This is not the end of the questions. It's simply a pause. Sleepy theories.